Hey friends, it's Matt here. Do you feel like a failure? You probably do, in some area of your life at least. I know that I have gone through big portions of my life feeling like a failure, feeling like things would never change, or that I'd just always sort of be stuck in a rut. And I want to talk about that today because there are ways to view failure that are different for successful people than they are for unsuccessful people. In fact, once I learned how to approach failure, I learned that failure is the most powerful tool to success. In fact, you get to success through failure. And I know that sounds a little bit trite. The problem is a lot of self-help type videos, a lot of self-improvement videos, they'll talk about failure, they'll tell you about failure, and then they'll just try and make you feel better. They won't actually give you any techniques on how to go about actually using failure, any real world techniques. But in this video, I'm really going to break it down to you. I'm going to tell you how I have found that I can use failure in my life, and then in my own reading, this has been verified by other people who are successful, a lot more successful than me. It seems like they use failure in the same way. So we're really going to break this down, and you're going to find that it really helps you out. Even if you feel awful right now, believe it or not, you can use that to your advantage, because if you feel awful right now, that means you probably failed at something, and we're going to talk about how you can use that and work from that and grow from that. So we're going to talk about three aspects of failure. We're going to talk about is how unsuccessful people view failure. There's two ways that unsuccessful people view failure, and they're both wrong. In fact, these two ways of viewing failure can put you in a negative spiral, and it's very hard to recover from that. Okay. Two, we're going to do sort of like a deep dive into failure, what failure actually means, and I'm going to try to reframe your worldview about failure and just how you approach it. It's a little philosophical, but hang in there. And then three is I'm going to give you some very specific techniques and some specific examples that you can use right away in your own life and start applying failure to succeed. Okay, so let's go down these 3 points. All right. Point number one, and this is really crucial, is that unsuccessful people have a way of viewing failure that is incorrect. It's not helpful. All right. Unsuccessful people view failure one of two ways. They either say, okay, I have to insulate myself from failure. I can never fail. So they try and put themselves in a cocoon, in a bubble where they never fail. Or they go all out, they rush towards failure. So they think, okay, I am so sick of just being in this cocoon. I've always wanted to open a restaurant, so I'm going to just take out $1 million of debt and I'm going to go open my restaurant and I'm going to be successful. And these are two sides of the same coin. It's like a pendulum swinging back and forth. They either are trying to cocoon themselves up and feel unsuccessful, or they feel like they're trapped there, or they get sick of that, they reject that, and then they just think, okay, I'm going to rush headlong into just doing what really excites me, but they do it too quickly and then they fail at that. And this is really sad, because what did they learn doing this? Well, they learn, well, maybe I'm just not made to succeed. Maybe I'm just made always to fail. And so when I tried to open the business, it didn't go well, so I failed at that. So I'm going back to my 9-to-5 job that I hate, and life just kind of sucks. And that's an awful lesson to lead. What you want to understand is that both of these are two sides of the same coin. Is that the saying? Yeah, two sides of the same coin. And you're in this trap where you're swinging back and forth of, I'm cocooned, I am trying something that's way too far outside of my comfort zone. And successful people don't view failure this way. They don't view it as you're just either going to try not to fail or you're going to go all out. They view failure in a completely different way. And to understand this, we have to take a look at what failure is. The key point to get about failure is that it's something in your head. I'd say 90, maybe 95% of the time, 99% of the time, failure is not something that can actually impact you. Unless you die or are in jail or something really catastrophic like that, failure is not something that's in the real world. So think about this. If you were to just vanish from the world today, there would not be signs everywhere that said like, okay, Matt failed here, Matt didn't fail here, he was a success here. It doesn't exist out there. And I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to make myself a failure at something I've never done before. So I am a failure at running marathons. I should have gotten up this morning and run a marathon. What a failure I am that I didn't run that marathon. You see what I'm doing? I'm taking something that I've never thought before, but I'm framing it in my head as a failure, because all a failure is a way of mentally looking at the world and saying, there's something I want and I didn't get it. There's a state that I want, a psychological state or an existential state, and I didn't get it. And we can see this is true when we look at people who we might think of as successful. Like, take a look at someone who has $1 billion. Probably you think, wow, that person's really successful. But a lot of those people who have $1 billion, they're looking at the person who has $10 billion and thinking, oh, that person's so successful. I'm such a failure. Isn't that bizarre? But it's true. And you see it in relationships too. I've seen people who have beautiful husband or wife and a beautiful boyfriend or girlfriend, and they spend all their time looking at other people, looking at other relationships and thinking, wow, I'm such a failure in my relationship. I wish I could be with that person. This just almost seems like it's hardwired into human nature in some way. But I have in my travels also met people who live on $2 or $3 a day or less, and they seem completely happy. They don't feel like failures. They just are very content and happy with their life. So what the heck's going on here? Well, it's that failure is a mental state. It's a way of framing the world. It's not something that exists out there. And once you see this, once you understand this, then you can start to view failure like a successful person. I've learned this the hard way. It's taken me a lot of time because I've had a lot of failures. And like I've said, I've had times where I've just like laid in bed all day, been completely depressed. I've had times where I've just started a business idea and it's just completely failed. So you can never look at someone at one point in their life and say they're a success or a failure. And that's how successful people look at success and failure. They don't look at it as something that they arrive at and then they're successful. No one who's really successful gets rich or whatever goes to the beach and then sips margaritas. They might do it for like a week, but if you look at those people, you'll find that they're really quite miserable, because the thing that got them successful was applying a specific approach to failure to their life and applying a system to their life. And here's that approach. Here's how you want to view failure. And this is the third point. The third point is failure is data from life experiences. You should write that down maybe. Failure is data from running life experiences, from running life experiments. That was a failure. Failure is data from running life experiments. So what does that mean? It means that when you fail, it's not a moral issue. You're not a good person or a bad person for failing. All that happened was you ran an experiment and it didn't get the result that you expected. Just like when you run a scientific experiment and it doesn't get the result you expect, then you don't say, oh, I'm such an awful person. You just look at that data and you say, okay, well, let's run another experiment. It's the same thing in life. That's what we call failure. So what you can start to do when you see that failure is not a moral issue is you can look at it a little more objectively. And what successful people do is they generate these systems where they're constantly failing in little ways, and then they're learning from that, and then they're applying that knowledge back into itself, okay? So that they're learning from that, and then they're improving the system. So let's take an example of what you might do to think of failure more as a data point and less as a moral issue. Let's say that you want to go to the gym and get healthy, right? When I was a kid, I was a pretty chubby kid. I felt really bad about how I looked, and so this is very personal for me in a way. Let's say you're really unhappy with your health. Okay, so you're going to think of a system. You want to think of a system that you can start to implement in your life. You don't want to think of just one thing. You can't just be like, I'm going to go to the gym today and we'll see how that goes. But you have to run an experiment across time. So let's say that the experiment is, I'm going to go to the gym every day, even if it's just for a few minutes, all right? And you start doing that, but then after a week, maybe you lose your momentum. You start to feel like, oh, this isn't going how I planned. And maybe a big reason for that is you find, well, I'm uncomfortable at the gym because I don't feel good about how I look, and I feel like other people are looking at me, and I feel judged, all right? So now you've run your system, but you've had a little failure. So you can learn from that failure. It wasn't so traumatic that you're going to stop going to the gym, right? So you're running your system, and the failure is, I don't like how I feel, I don't like how people are looking at me. So one modification that you might make to that system is you might find a friend to go with you who also is maybe not quite in shape or whatever, feels a little insecure, so you can sort of support each other. That's just one idea. So maybe you try that out, maybe that works. So then after about 30 days or say 60 days, you're like, okay, I've been going to the gym, but I don't feel like I'm losing weight. All right, now we have another little failure that we can work with. So you're taking that failure and say, okay, well, maybe I can change my diet. All right, so notice here what I've done is I haven't just guessed, by the way. I have applied some reading to my system, some learning to my system. And this is really crucial. When you try to run these experiments, you don't want to just blind luck it. You don't want to rush into it. That's kind of like our person who opened the restaurant. That's actually what a lot of people do when they open a business, is they just blind luck it. They're like, all right, I'm just going to fly into this. You want to have an action bias. So you do want to make sure that you start running the experiment. That's really important because you don't want to sit around like reading books all day, but you also want to pair that with other people's successes, other people's failures, so you can at least get going in the general direction. But your situation is always going to be unique in one way or another. So for example, in this example, your situation was unique in that you needed some moral support at the gym, all right? So now let's keep going, right? You're going to the gym and you aren't losing weight. So you read somewhere, okay, well, I should modify my diet. Maybe you read about the paleo diet. So you try that and you can stick to that for a week, but you realize, oh, okay, well, that didn't, I'm still having trouble because I have cravings sometimes for pizza. I want to go have a slice of pizza. So then you read, well, there's a modified version where I can cheat sometimes and I can start to implement that sometimes. So you see, this changes the experiment, changes the system, and you're changing it in relation to yourself. And that's where most people fail. They either don't have a system, they don't run experiments, or they don't try and relate the system to themselves by running small experiments. So that's how you can start to apply this mindset of failure being a data point to yourself. Now, you might ask me, how big of an experiment do I run? Do I take out that $1 million loan and try and open a business? Well, if you haven't had a business, maybe not yet. It all depends on your context. The size of the experiment depends on how much you can handle psychologically and how much you can handle existentially. And the golden rule, the rule of thumb, the rule here is you want to only run an experiment that will not completely break the bank or completely break you down psychologically. Because remember, what we're trying to do is run a lot of experiments. We're trying to iterate experiments over and over and over again as quickly as we can. Now, quickly might mean that you have to, stick it out for 3 months, 6 months, even a couple years to see if it works. But you don't want to do something where if it doesn't work, then you're bankrupt, because then you have to start all over again, or you might not be able to pull yourself up. So you have to consider your own context. You have to consider what's too big. You want to push yourself a little bit outside of your comfort zone, right? But judge based on your own context, and you're going to get a better sense of that context as you take action. So, for example, with my business, when I opened my first business, I realized, okay, I know enough to know that I don't know about running a business. Did that make any sense? I hope so. And so I'm just going to try to have someone come and do some work for me from my home. I have clients, I have students, right? So I'm going to have someone come and try and teach students from my home. And we'll see how that goes. I think I lined up one student and this person came over and the student didn't show up. So that was a failure. I learned from that, okay, well, clients just might not show up. So I have to find some sort of system where they show up. And actually that had to happen several times before I learned from that, but you get the point. And I think also the person who came over broke a little thing of mine, which is totally fine. But maybe I learned from that, well, be careful who you hire, right? And then I had to try a couple more iterations where I hired other people to work for me, and then I started and there was a handful of students coming to my house, and then I realized, okay, I can handle a little more stress. I can handle a little more chance of failure. So I rented out a place to start to run my business from, and that was really pushing it actually. That was pretty stressful. And the stress from that I learned, okay, don't go too far. Don't get $200,000 into debt. For me, where I am right now, that's too much. And your context may be completely different. Like, there have been times in my life where getting out of bed and making a pot of coffee, that was like the most I could do, right? And then there's contexts for other people where they have $2 billion and taking out a $100 million loan to start some venture is not a problem because they're so experienced in business. They know exactly how to work that. And even if they get completely wiped out, they can just start over again. So it all depends on your context. So just to go over these 3 points again, let's see, what were they? First, you want to understand how unsuccessful people view failure and don't get caught in that trap of being either completely isolated or going all out without any regard to knowledge or caution. Second, you want to think about what failure is. Remember, it doesn't exist in the outside world as much as you think it does. It's a way of framing the world. And third, start to run experiments and see failure as data points. I have not met a successful person who doesn't do this. This is so important. So make sure you start running little experiments, moving towards the direction that interests you, and then you can change course as you go and change the system as you go. So listen, I hope that this is helpful. I really enjoyed thinking about this subject and making this video. And my goal in these videos is to help as many people as possible, whether they're business people or want to start a business or entrepreneurs or just people who want to improve their lives. And you'll thank me a lot and help me a lot if you like this video and subscribe to the channel and comment below, because that means that this video is going to be seen by as many people as possible. It'll help as many people as possible, and it's like just a nice thank you to me. And what I've done somewhere here, I don't know where it'll be, but let's try somewhere here on the screen, there's going to be other videos that you can watch. So check those videos out. Make sure you subscribe. And I put a video out every day. So hit that bell as well, and you'll get a notification every time I put a video out. Okay, everybody, thanks for watching. I wish you lots of failure. Have a great day. I'll see you in the next video.